Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to the Niche Cast. We are the Niche Case, the niche-case.com. Big it up for Aotearoa Sport. We are here in honour of Aotearoa Sport. We love Aotearoa. We love sport, and that means we love Aotearoa Sport. And it's a glorious time to be alive, glorious time to be in Aotearoa. We are here for a big old kōrero, spin a big old yarn about Aotearoa Sport. Big it up to the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/our Niche Case cricket podcast early in the week. And that is the best way to support the Niche Case, the Niche Cast, our variety show podcast, the email banger. However you get your Niche Case content, the best way to support it is via Patreon, patreon.com/our Niche Case. And also tomorrow is Friday, which means we have our email newsletter being delivered by the Ravens. They're not flying right now. Got to do a bit more mahi, but then the Ravens will be sent out tomorrow and you'll get an email newsletter. Somehow the Ravens have figured out email and all that shit. Don't ask me. I'm just rolling with the magic of nature here. Email newsletter, lots of little newsy bits, lots of current events, lots of Aotearoa sporting stuff to preview on the weekend. And that is also comes on a Monday. So if you love Niche Case content and you want extra content, or you just don't like social media and you want all the Niche Case content delivered to you by the Ravens, sign up to the email newsletter, thenichecase.substack.com. And of course, we're always writing about Aotearoa Sport on our website, theniche-case.com. Big flying Kiwis, big Aotearoa Warriors yarn. Big up Joseph Tapine, wrote about him earlier in the week. The Wildcards done a massive debrief on the stinky Aotearoa Breakers. And there's all sorts of Aotearoa sporting yarns on our website, theniche-case.com as well. We always start our podcast with a dose of mindfulness. Give us the medicine, Wildcard.
Yeah, the medicine this week is coming from, how do I describe this guy? We'll call him cosmic jazz musician Sun Ra, who once said, "The trouble with the people on this planet is they refuse to think he's doubled himself up. The trouble with the people on this planet is they refuse to think. They refuse to believe anything except what they know."
People refuse to think and people refuse to something they don't know, acknowledge what they don't.
People refuse to believe anything they don't know.
That's over my head.
As is a lot of Sun Ra's music to many people as well. One of those guys who takes a little bit of like acclimatizing to before you get it. Yeah, no, it's just like, he refused, because it's a little bit of a tricky statement, isn't it? Because it comes back around on itself. It's saying they know these things, but they refuse to believe things that they don't know. I guess if he had said refuse to believe things they don't already know, maybe spells that out a little bit clearer. Like people don't want to think beyond the knowledge that they already have. It's an idea, at least the way I interpret that, is the idea of just lacking in open-mindedness, lacking in the willingness to absorb new information. Often I would take that further. Often I would say because people tend to feel a little bit threatened by new information in case it contradicts things that they think that they already know as well, which also swings back around on that idea. So in general, if you want to live with Sun Ra on his planet, just gotta have an open mind. Gotta have a willingness to learn and stay learning.
Salute, hat tip to the Shoshin mindset. You got to acknowledge what you don't know, and you got to be open to what you don't know, so that you can learn and grow and be better, be a better human, which is all we're trying to do here on planet Earth. Here's something I do know.
Planets too.
Here is something I do know for sure. I'm open to learning more about this, but here is what I know for sure, and that is that Tom Vodanovich is an NBL champion with the Sydney Kings. For those who don't know, Tom Vodanovich, fantastic Aotearoa basketballer, one of the many Kiwis competing in the IPL. not the IPL, because he's far too big to be playing cricket. Like, he'd be steaming in, bowling 140, banging big sixes if he was playing cricket. But he plays basketball and he plays in the NBL in Australia. He is now an NBL champion with the Sydney Kings. Many Aotearoa ballers playing in the NBL, the Australian NBL, outside of the Breakers. Tom Vodanovich, is he soon going to be coming to the Aotearoa NBL as well?
Certainly is. Signed on with the Wellington Saints, I believe. And yeah, has missed the first couple of games for them. They've actually lost their first, like one of the, generally one of the strongest teams out there. They've actually lost their first couple of games by hefty margins, like 20-point defeats in both of them. I think to Southland and to Otago. So they will definitely, he's not the only person who hasn't arrived for them yet as well. It's why they've been struggling. But and a few teams have been in a similar boat, just waiting for their Aussie NBL guys and some imports to turn up and stuff. But yeah, he'll be a welcome addition to that Saints team, no doubt.
And he is a Wellington powerhouse. So it is a continuation of our Big Up Wellington week now, because Tom Vodanovich is an NBL champion and apparently he's from Wellington. So big it up to him. It says on, I found Real GM, it said hometown Wellington. So
yeah. It's Wikipedia says he was born there as well, born in Wellington. So there you go.
Pick up Wellington. It is the week
Went
of
to St. Patrick's College. There you go. It works.
So Tom Vodanovich is the NBL champion. No other Kiwis on that Sydney Kings roster, right?
No. There were really only 3 New Zealanders who made the finals at all. Tom Vodanovich with the Sydney Kings, and then Melbourne United had Shea Illy and Dion Prewster. Dion Prewster in a very deep like bench role, so I don't believe he took the court during the final series, whereas Shea Illy was obviously a key player for them, as he has been all season for Melbourne. But they lost in the semi-finals to the Tasmania Jack Jumpers, who then lost 3 straight to the Sydney Kings in the finals, who were deserving champions in the end. And Vodanovich wasn't like, he didn't have an Illy type role for them, but he was, a regular guy off the bench who would come and contribute. Probably like, I looked it up, like during the season, he was sort of like 10, 11, 12 sort of minutes per game. During the playoffs, obviously, rotations get a bit tighter and you want your best guys playing longer minutes. So that shrunk a little bit. Didn't really feature much in the semis. They won both their semi games, I think. They actually went 5-0 through the finals, come to think of it. Played, I think he got a DMP in one game, played about 3.5 minutes in the other game, but was a bit more against like a very defense-first Tasmania team who played hard, like very hard physical stuff. To Vodanovich came back into the mix a bit more. So I think he got like sort of like 5 to 8 minute range for most of those. And he was on the court for a lot of the start of that fourth quarter last night in the clinching game, where they, it was pretty even at the start of the quarter. They then went on a big run, and he was out there for a lot of that run, and which surged them on towards clinching the title. So shout out to Tommy V. Another one of those guys who has left the Breakers and gone on to bigger and better things. Like the thing that people say about the Warriors in the NRL, which is true in some cases and not true in other cases, which therefore makes it not true in the overall case. Seems to be a little bit more like Shea Illy is another guy who left the Breakers in the last couple of years and has become a much better player since. And Yanni Wetzel did it the other way around though, so shout out to him. But there's another NBL champion Kiwi and just in Australia. So and maybe he'll go back to back with the Saints as well. Who knows?
Fuck the Breakers, right? We're not here to talk about the Breakers, but I do find it interesting. This is something we have discussed plenty before, so we don't need to do the full podcast about this again. But you mentioned the thing about players leaving the Warriors to bigger and better things and players leaving the Breakers to bigger and better things. The Breakers don't have a junior system. The Breakers barely provide a pathway for Aotearoa basketball players. So just for the listener and anyone out there, every negative thought you think about the Warriors or hear or absorb about the Warriors, the Breakers are worse. So keep that in mind when you're looking around the Aotearoa media sphere and you're hearing all these things about Warriors pathways and junior development and players leaving to go here. And why can't the Warriors keep them? Why can't the Warriors get them? The Breakers are worse. And that needs to be remembered, not just because they're worse, they're 10 times worse. And they just have a whole stinky vibe. So I kind of think, just to update the scale, I think the Wellington Phoenix are probably in first spot right now, just as far as their, they've got a finals caliber team, Wellington Phoenix. They also have a Wahine team. So that's fantastic. And they have a lot of local juniors. They've got a local pipeline. So they're in first. Warriors, we've lost the women's team, but there is a future there as well. They've got a junior pipeline, given this, all these teams are in the same context under the same conditions. And the Warriors, they're just a bit below the Phoenix as far as junior development and the standing within their competition. So they're second. Have we ever heard about a Breakers Wahine team? Nope. Are there many Breakers juniors? Nope. Do the Breakers win games? Nope. So they're third. They suck. Who cares about them? But that's the context we're operating here. So just keep that in mind when you are hearing people complain about the Warriors. Don't really hear those complaints for the Phoenix, which is fine and dandy because it is correct. Why would you complain about a fantastic junior development system and so on and so forth? So I am interested. Just wildcard, can you give us the basic scouting report for Tom Vodanovich, and to do the same with Shea Ili, maybe compare him to Shea Ili? Because I imagine Tom Vodanovich, hustle and bustle and just the, nuggety number 4, quintessential Aotearoa big man on the basketball court. But I haven't really watched them. I haven't really watched Shea Ili either. So can you just give us a bit of a quick breakdown on what Tom Vodanovich does as a basketball player, NBL champ, and of course these dudes are now coming back to Aotearoa as well.
I'm not sure if Shea Ili is. I think he might just live in Melbourne at the moment, so I'm not sure if he's coming back for the season or not. But he obviously has. In fact, he's won titles with the Saints in the past. He might be coming back. I haven't looked or checked. So Vodanovich, 27 years old, 2.01 meters tall. So not overly like tall for his position. He's like, NBL level, he's a power forward. At Kiwi NBL level, probably could play a bit of center as well. That's
rugby union lock size.
Yeah.
Number 6, number 8. Like that's the kind of stature he would have, just to compare it to a different sport. If he was to play NRL, he'd be looking like middle forward.
Maybe back row, I don't know, but he probably could do some middle forward because he's like, he's pretty tall, but he's also very strong. Like he's a big dude. He's solid. You don't move him around very easy. That has been a bit of an issue for him in the past because he didn't move so quickly across the court, but he is in I think the last sort of 2 years in particular, we've really seen, coinciding with the time that he was released by the Breakers, like at a time where he was competing for a new contract for the Breakers. And then he had this NBL season where he looked so much fitter. And the thing that he's always been a good rebounder and a hustler and a tough guy. But the thing that really took his game to a new level was that right about that time, he started shooting 3-pointers and he started making 3-pointers. Like he became a gun 3-point shooter. In this final series, I think shot 4 attempts, made 3 of them. So, small sample size, but he's hitting he's getting 1 shot a game and he's making it kind of thing. That somehow didn't lead the Breakers to re-sign him when he was this new and improved guy, but no dramas, went to the Sydney Kings, had 2 years with them. He's just won a title with them. And yeah, that's the hard and fast on Tom Vodanovich is he's a big dude. He's a strong dude. He's fitter now than he has been at any point in his career to date. And the thing that really has unlocked his game and allowed him to become a stable Aussie NBL caliber player is that 3-point shooting as well. Like once he unlocked that just took him to the next level.
Maybe a bit of Shoshin mentality there as well, working with Andrew Bogut, because Andrew Bogut played for the Sydney Kings recently, like last year.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. I think they might have had a year cross, and I'm sure they'd have met and discussed a bit of basketball now and then and various things. Bogey, not exactly a 3-point shooter, but certainly someone who knows the ins and outs. He played with two of the greatest 3-point shooters of all time in Golden State, so no dramas there.
Well, you're not going to Andrew Bogut to learn about 3-point shooting. You're going to Andrew Bogut to learn how to be a niggly fucking big man, and I think he's doing a good job.
The dark arts. He certainly has. Certainly has.
Dodger. Any other like little Aotearoa NBL notes, or you been a bit of a midweeker and you haven't really tapped into that? That's a weekend activity.
Well, yes and no, but like the league itself is definitely it feels like a ramping up period through these first couple of weeks, because you have had teams that haven't been at full strength yet, and so it's sort of like get some points on the board nice and early and see how it goes. But maybe not the most reflective of what the tournament's going to look like moving forward, like from next week onwards, when teams have pretty much got all their dudes. I mean, a quick shout out to Jaden Bazan, who had an outstanding game on the weekend. He was the top performer that I saw over the last round, but I don't know, not too much else because of that exact reason. Like, because it's just sort of getting into gears at the moment. That league, it's on the runway, And
it's not the Ben Simmons ramp up to nowhere.
No,
it's the actual ramp up process.
The ramp up to back
tapering,
surgery.
tapering. Not tapering off, tapering up, and actual. We're on the ramp to somewhere as opposed to ramping up to nowhere. I did manage to catch some Hiram Harris the other day, and I continued to be amazed at just how he fucking does absolutely everything on the court. Did watch a bit of Max Darling as well. Mm-hmm. Hadn't seen too much of him, and I saw him play for Canterbury. So there is some good nuggets. We'll keep an eye on that moving forward. One other thing I did want to ask you about or quiz you about is the stuff around. There are some cricket things happening. Obviously, we're on the Kiwi County tour, so those games swing back. I think Will Young's stint might have finished, maybe. I'm not too sure. I'll have to clarify that. But there's another round of games tonight. IPL trucks on. Who cares? We do have the story wildcard about Brendon McCullum signing up, or odds-on favourite, to be the England Test coach. And the only thing that comes to my mind is how good it's going to be to beat him. Like, I give no fucks about Brendon McCullum, England Test coach. I just want to beat him. And this plays into our narrative wildcard that everyone's going to be hyped up around England. We talk about this on our Patreon podcast every week. So shout out to the Patreon podcast. Sign up, support us via Patreon, and you'll hear these ideas every week. We have noted a bit of hype around England cricket. They've had another review. Only shit teams, only shit organizations have reviews. That's the whole point. But England have reviews every year, and this is another review cycle for England cricket. There's going to be buzz. There's Ben Stokes as the captain, Brendon McCullum and all of everything he does, Test coach. Going to have Broad and Anderson back. We're going to have all these players scoring runs in county cricket. Guys are taking wickets. It's a new era for England cricket. And then the Black Caps go there and sweep them 3-0. That's what's going to happen. And I am going to take great joy in Brendon McCullum not being the saviour. Because my Aotearoa Warriors diary was that Tohu Harris is not the saviour for the Warriors. Dear England cricket, Brendon McCullum's not your saviour. So that was very Kiwi. Saviour. Brendon McCullum is not your saviour. Brendon McCullum, no disrespect, I don't know what he's like as a coach, but it doesn't matter because the Black Caps are better. and they're going to beat them 3-0. And I'm just, for some reason, I'm taking, these visions are making me really happy. Again, no idea what he's like as a coach, test coach. Who knows? It doesn't matter, though. That's the thing. No matter what England does, no matter what the Warriors do, no matter what these organizations do, they're just what they are. And England cricket sucks.
It's funny because when they revamped their ODI team and got them real good after having an absolute disaster when they came here in 2015 for the World Cup, still remember, I think it was Trent Bolt taking a bunch of, or it might have been Tim Southee, or it might have been the two combining and bowled them out for like 70 or something. And then McCullum coming into bat and just smoking a bunch of boundaries. It was like doing that McCullum thing where he's like, I'm opening, we've bowled them out cheaply. Let's have some fun. That's funny that like, because then they obviously went and, won with an asterisk, the 2019 version at home. And it was this thing about how like Owen Morgan, best mates with Brendon McCullum, taking all his ideas, copying his homework. Like let's revamp. And now their test team is stumbling. Let's get the McCullum in. Let's get him, and we'll don't even have to steal his homework anymore. Like we'll just pay for it. We'll hire him. That's funny to me. Like it also feels like in the same way that Owen Morgan was probably very on board with the McCullum tendencies because they're similar kind of players and they're good mates and everything like that. Feels like Brendon McCullum getting the test gig also probably has a lot to do with being good mates with Rob Key, who's the new boss of shenanigans at English cricket. So he's never coached a first class game before. He has done a lot of IPL coaching and he's decent at it, but it's a very different task. But he played 101 test matches, so he obviously knows a fair bit about test cricket, so that's not necessarily a problem. And his mentality should go well with Ben Stokes' mentality. Don't know how well it goes with like Zach Crawley and Dom Sibley's mentalities. I think that might be a different kettle of fish, but I just find the whole scenario really interesting and really funky because it's this thing that came a little bit out of the blue. You didn't necessarily realize he was that keen on a job like that, and maybe he wasn't until the offer came along. But he's an ambitious dude, so I'm not surprised that he would want to take it when it did, when he was given that opportunity. And it hasn't been confirmed at the moment, but we're all assuming that it will, because you don't get those leaks saying that he's the front runner without it being like a thing that people are going to do, especially when the response has been relatively positive. The only time that would change is if all of a sudden people start going, but what about his old racist tweets or something? And then they might change their mind when that's why those things get leaked early, is just that last bit of, public mentality assurance. But that's not a problem with Brendon McCullum. So I'm sure he'll get that gig, and that would mean his first match in charge will be against New Zealand at Lords. So, and New Zealand-born Ben Stokes, first game in charge as captain of that team as well. It's just this weird little. I don't even quite know what to make of it. Like, I don't know how to turn that into expectations ahead of the series. So I think probably it's best just not to necessarily change anything and just feel the same. Well, we've still got a better team than them, as you said. Like, better team, probably going to win. Coaches in their very first game in charge, not exactly going to have a lot of time to change things. Same deal with the captain. Might take them a test or two to get up and running. So I'm still confident about the Black Caps there. But it's just this weird thing where there's all these links and coincidences that seem to be aligning around this test series against England, which hopefully is one of those blessed alignment type things, which is going to just lead to that 3-0 series win that you predicted. But I'm actually really excited to see what Brendon McCullum might do with that England test team. I just think with any new coach, you got to be patient and not expect them to be amazing in the first series in charge. So I'm still pretty confident about the Black Caps there.
It feels like Craig Fitzgibbon was a really good assistant coach for many years and kind of waited for the right NRL club to become a head coach. And the same thing is happening with Cameron Ciraldo, assistant coach of the Panthers. Like, they're not taking the first gig they can. They are waiting for the right gig. And I can see why. Again, like we're having some fun here, but none of this is to do with Brendon McCullum. It's purely to do with England cricket. But if you're Brendon McCullum, well, obviously the coach of the England Test team is going to make a lot of money. So, given what we know about some of Brendon McCullum's interests, he likes to make a lot of money. So that's a good opportunity
for his horse debts.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you can. So if Craig Fitzgibbon, he's looking at the Sharks like they've got a really good roster. They've got a fantastic local nursery, really good signings. We'll get some more signings, bang, bang. I don't like any coach is looking at England cricket and they think what's possible. So you're the coach and you're looking there and you're like, yeah, we'll get some of these lads on the park with some really like fantastic depth, got 1 billion county players, got some of the best cricketers in the world, all good. It doesn't take into account the yuck. And that's the thing we're poking fun at, just the yuck of England cricket. Also, Aotearoa is the best sporting nation in the world wildcard, as the niche case serves as an example of that. Here's a different wrinkle, because Aotearoa has some cricket coaches. Stephen Fleming is the best T20 coach in the world. Like, he only wins competitions with Chennai in the IPL. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but he has won multiple competitions as a coach for Chennai. And he's also been a BBL coach. Daniel Vettori coaches everywhere around the world. Jeetan Patel was England's spin coach recently as well. He was there at the Ashes. So when Jack Leach was getting pumped in that first test, and it was kind of the signal of England's demise in that Ashes series, Jeetan Patel was the spin coach, kind of like mentoring Jack Leach through that bullshit. They, like, obviously there are career coaches who we might know less about, but if you look like in Aotearoa, there's a lot of there's a heavy African influence on the cricket coaches. Think about like Heinrich Milan, who's now coaching Ireland or Scotland. Dion
Ireland,
Ibrahim,
I think it was, yeah,
and Dion Ibrahim's come through as well. I think there was Rob Walter was a factor. I don't even know if he's South African though, so I'm speaking out of turn here. But that is to say there's not necessarily a lot of Kiwi coaches in Aotearoa cricket. But when you get into the global landscape, it's kind of out of proportion. Because I did see, like, yeah, of course, there are some guys like Graham Aldridge. There are Kiwi coaches around the domestic circuit, but it's not in proportion with the way these higher level international coaches and some of Aotearoa's greatest cricketers ever, the standing they hold in the international coaching circuit. It's a bit different. And I do find that interesting because not only is Aotearoa the best sporting nation in the world, not only is Aotearoa cricket and the Black Caps, let's go with the best cricket team in the world, given that we made the T20 World Cup final, we made the ODI World Cup final, and we won the World Test Championship final. Only team to make all 3 finals. That's a pretty good excuse to say we're the best cricket team in the world as well. Also producing coaches for other nations and T20 teams. That's an extra wrinkle to chuck in there as well.
Yeah, I feel I don't know what the context is, but I feel compelled to point out like Gary Stead, New Zealander coaching the New Zealand team.
He's all right, yeah.
He's doing okay, and then the contrast of that being, I wonder if the White Ferns will hire a local to replace Englishman Bob Carter, albeit domesticated Englishman, but still Englishman, for their next coach. I'm curious how that might go. And then the other point is that, like, not RIP, but at least pour one out for the stakes of Spark Sport, whose broadcast team has now twice lost senior commentators to the English Test cricket team. First Jeetan Patel and now Brendon McCullum. So Gene Patel was the guy who at first, like their first summer in charge, it was like, hey, that's the one funky guy that you've added to the crew that isn't just like recycling what Sky used to do. He could be a really good commentator as well. This will be quite funky to see how this goes. And then hardly lasted before England came over to tour, took him back with them as the bowling, the spin coach specifically, wasn't it? And now Brendon McCullum, who felt like he was supposed to be the headline act for Spark Sport, but the Spark schedules aren't necessarily like always in alignment, and he would sort of do the test matches and not necessarily, like, he would basically never do domestic stuff and wouldn't be there for every Black Caps game necessarily in the other formats, but is a really good commentator when he's got that opportunity. When he's there, it's a little bit of a shame that he won't be around. Stephen Fleming as well is technically part of that crew, does a lot of coaching in the IPL, isn't always available. But the fact that the English Test cricket team is specifically come and taken to, like, is who's next? Like Mark Richardson or Scotty Stevenson, maybe the head of media for the England Test cricket team might be the next option. I don't know.
It is interesting. They're not taking the best coaches. They're taking the best commentators to be their coaches. But
people who talk the best.
Yeah.
You do have to interview for these jobs, so that is important. I heard that Brendon McCullum did 2 interviews and apparently impressed everybody thoroughly. I don't know if he had any PowerPoint presentations or whatever, or I don't know, role play acts. Or I don't know what he did to be other than just be his normal charismatic self. I assume that was probably enough.
I'm fairly confident Brendon McCullum can spin a yarn. But I did interrupt you there. So I did hear Craig McMillan's name mentioned by yourself, and just happy we still got Craig McMillan on our airwaves, and that Craig McMillan isn't going nowhere as a media personality in Aotearoa. Wildcard, we
double-edged sword, that one, but yeah,
it's called sarcasm, you know. A-League footy.
There's good and there's bad, you know.
A-League footy. Actually, shout out Craig McMillan. Gets a tough rap on the niche case, but he's there. He's always there. And that's what we like. We like our consistency with sport content, always there. As we do our best to just be there. Craig McMillan is always there. He's not off gallivanting, coaching here or doing some gig there. Craig McMillan just loves cricket, and he loves talking about cricket. And I love Craig McMillan wildcard, and I love A-League finals footy. Wellington Phoenix in the finals, going better than the Breakers, going better than the Warriors. Where are they at? This Saturday, maybe?
Saturday night, 9:45 p.m. away to Western United in round 1 elimination final of the 2021-22 A-League men's playoffs, finals. I guess finals is, I think, what they call them. Lost a bit of steam at the end of that, but, you know.
So just to summarize it, to set this yarn up for us, can you give me a couple of minutes just to describe how you're feeling? Like, take everything else out of it and just give me a couple minutes. What are you feeling as the resident Wellington Phoenix expert, Aotearoa's Wellington Phoenix expert, the world, planet Earth's Wellington Phoenix expert? How are you feeling coming into this game of finals footy?
Well, the first thing is that regardless of how they do in this game, I think they've already had just an enormously impressive season. It's easy to overlook the fact that when teams overcome various obstacles and still get results, like, it's easy to overlook those obstacles because it's like, well, they still got the results. I've just written an article about this specifically that's up on the website now. It's like, when you stop and think about it and take a step back and look at it all like in context, I can't imagine anyone has done a better job of coaching an A-League team than Ufuk Talai this season. They've had so the second full season in a row they've had to be stranded in Australia. That has off-field ramifications, obviously. It also has on-field, it has commercial ramifications as well, which are major and the sort of thing we don't really talk about that much. But just think of not getting gate receipts and stuff, and just how much for a club that probably is on the borderline financially anyway, how much that would cause them to struggle and having to scramble for new sponsors because you're now playing in a different marketplace and all this, and just all of that. But then the on-field ramifications of being in Australia means you basically don't have home games. You only have neutral or away games. The irony of that being that despite the fact that the Phoenix have played 13 home games this season in 8 different stadiums, only 2 of those stadiums being in New Zealand as well, and that coming in their final 2 home games. Their first 11 were all spread out across Australia. They actually have the 3rd best home record in the A-League this season. I think they've won 8 of those 13 games. It's actually kind of amazing that they've done that. That's a problem. You've also got the fact that they've had not 1 but 2 COVID outbreaks through their season, which has the ramifications of like guys losing match fitness in the middle, games being postponed, then having to play those games later on in the season at short notice and a bunch of midweeks when you're already going through by that time an injury crisis where, like, you know, the captain's out for the rest of the season. Clayton Lewis missed big time. Josh Laws has missed big time. Piscopo Soterio have had little injuries in and out. Gary Hooper started the first 4 games in a row, only started 3 of the next 23 because of injuries. Like, not to mention all the smaller niggly ones from game to game, you know. There's been that. There's also been the fact that sometimes they've just had to dip a bit too deeply into the depth bag and bad matchups, and they've had 6 different occasions where they've been pumped by at least 4 goals. Like, they've lost, I think, 11 games all up. 6 of those have been by 4 or more goals. So often when they would lose, they would get absolutely smoked. And yet 4 of those 6 times they bounce back to win the very next game. Like, the resilience that shows, not letting that become a habit, not letting that become something that like drags their whole season down. All of that I think is incredible. And the fact that they've got as far as they have to make the finals at all, I just think is an astoundingly like big achievement, regardless of what happens against Western United on the weekend. Having said that, this is their best opportunity to win a finals game for 10 years since they last won a finals game, which was, like, to put that in context, Paul Eiffel 85th minute penalty was the last time, I think it was 2012, exactly 10 years ago, against, I can't remember now, I think it was Sydney FC, like a 3-2 win. 10 years without a playoff win. They're playing Western United, who they've played, I think, 9 times in their existence, like since Western United came into the league. They played them 9 times and have beaten them 7 of those times. I think there's a draw and a loss. The loss was the very first time they played them. Since then, they've gone like 8 or 9 games undefeated, something like that. It might be 10. I can't remember. It gets frisky in my memory, because there is actually an FFA Cup game that they played against them this season. So some stats will include the A-League, some will include the FFA Cup. I'm including the FFA Cup here because that was this season, beat them 1-0. Also beat them, I think, 3-1 at 2-1, I think, something like that, 3-1, 2-1, and then also beat them, I think, like 4-1 or something later. Or like, they've beaten them all 3 times that they've played them this season. This is just, for whatever reason, a matchup that they quite like. Old mate Diamante's injured. He's not going to be playing for Western United. Clayton Lewis is back for the Phoenix. Don't know if guys like Josh Laws or that'll be back, but close enough. Like, Lewis at least makes a major difference in steadying that midfield. Like, as far as the Phoenix hopes for winning a first playoff game for a decade go, this is a perfect matchup. And so excitement levels, to come all the way back around to the start of the question, through the roof. Like, this is as like big as it gets for the Wellington Phoenix. This is a massive, massive game, and super excited for it.
Bit of a fizz there for the Wellington Phoenix matchup. That's a good record they have against Western United that you outlined. So that's quite handy coming into a finals game. I don't think previously against opponents they would have had a winning record against that finals team. Like, it kind of feels like in the past the Wellington Phoenix have always fumbled or stumbled their way into finals footy. I don't know if that's correct. That's just my feeling of how their playoffs or finals footy tends to go. And if you're doing that, you're not necessarily going to be dominating the team that you're going to play against in the finals, as they're doing against Western United. You mentioned Clayton Lewis coming back. That's a good one, considering he was a niche case favourite last season, he hasn't played for a while, right?
No, he missed 9 games with that ankle injury that he picked up about a week or two after Alex Rufer did his ACL. So it was one of those like, Rufer goes down injured. What are they going to do? They've had to break up this combination, this midfield combination that's started the season. Like, people seem to forget for some reason that the start of the season getting a lot of criticism. They weren't playing that well, but really came around once they got a bit more of a steady team in front of them. Like once Sandoval and Wootton arrived, that midfield duo really came into their own and were excellent for a couple months as they were going undefeated. Rufer gets injured. What are we going to do? Clayton Lewis, I guess, has got to step up and be the leader now on this crew. Probably playing with Nick Pennington, maybe Josh Laws pushes forward. How's it? And then he gets injured himself. Like, before we could even figure out the answer to that question, he's out and it looks like he's done for the season. But then there's news that maybe it's not as bad as first feared, could get back by the time the finals, managed to get back last week, comes off the bench at halftime against Melbourne City, and honestly, like, helped change the game. Like, just the vision of that Wellington Phoenix team for the first time in 2 months, having a functional midfield, it makes a big difference. It's kind of an important area of the park, and just having his poise, his technical ability doesn't hurt as well. It's not necessarily a midfield specific thing, but his set piece delivery is fantastic and was absolutely brilliant before he got injured this season. So hoping for some of them silky corner kick and free kick deliveries from him into the area. And against Western United, he makes a massive difference to that team. Just basically to link up the defense and the like what a midfielder is supposed to do, to link the defensive aspect of the team with the attacking aspect of the team, being able to do a bit of both. He's relatively experienced at this level now. And yeah, just 45 minutes of him against Melbourne City really showed what the Phoenix had been missing out on while he wasn't available, because it makes a difference. It makes a difference having a functional midfield.
So you mentioned 45 minutes off the bench last week. So it's not as if Clayton Lewis is returning cold and he's come, he might come off the bench for this game. Who knows? He might start, but he's not coming in. First game back, big finals game. How's he going to be feeling? Is he fit enough? Can he last the whole game? Let alone what's his touch like? You mentioned the set piece. That takes a bit of finesse. It takes a bit of touch. It takes repetitions and form to really whip those balls in. Like, if you want to come in and bang a cover drive, you got to be in form. And I imagine it's the same for footballers. Like, if you're trying to whip in a corner kick on the spot, you got to be playing footy. And if you're going to, do a free kick into the top right, bottom left, wherever you're going to put it where you want to put it, you got to be playing footy. So I imagine it's quite promising for Wellington Phoenix fans that Clayton Lewis did return to the field last week to set up this week. This is good, because if I had asked you this question without mentioning Clayton Lewis, I think you would have said Clayton Lewis as your answer, and because he's that type of footballer. But my question to you is there like a undercover, low-key, underground thing that you might be paying attention to for the fans, Wellington Phoenix fans, those who are going to be watching this game, Kiwi sports fans, that is like an indicator of how the Wellington Phoenix are performing, or that you're just intrigued about, that maybe you can share with us and share with the listener so that they can also keep an eye on that during the game? Again, if we weren't talking about Clayton Lewis, I reckon you would have said Clayton Lewis for the answer, just with how he plays his footy, as you said, key cog in the midfield. But is there anyone else in the team, in the squad, you're like, oh, if this dude's going to be doing a bit of good mahi, then the Wellington Phoenix are going to be in a good stead for the game?
Yeah, it definitely would have been Clayton Lewis, because when you think about it, like, the midfield is where a game gets controlled, right? And so we've been talking about this team that has been like up and down, these wild deviances from game to game. Like, that exhibits a lack of control, right? And if you don't have a midfield that's playing at a capacity to be able to control a game, well, that explains why they don't seem to be able to control games, right? So like, 1 week they'll be able to overcome that because their counter-attacking prowess gets the job done and their, backs the wall defensive efforts are good enough. Another week, it's not, and they'll lose 4-0. Like we've been seeing this from game to game over the last 2 months. So it would have been him. Outside of him, I don't necessarily know about whether it makes a major difference to how the team actually performs, like where one is wildly better than the other. I think it could go either way. But two things in particular I am looking closely at when the team is named. First of all, will they stick with the back five that they've been playing for the last few games now that they have Lewis presumably going to start in midfield? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. They did go to a back four during that second half against City, and it's definitely Talai's preference. It's just whether he feels like there's enough time between Monday night and Saturday night in order to like change players' habits, I think was a word that he used in his last press conference. Like get people back into the functions of playing with a back four. If he does go to a back four, where does he put Tim Payne? So does he play Tim Payne at right back, where Tim Payne is the best right back, or does he play Tim Payne at centre back with Scott Wooden and pick someone like Louis Fenton's really gone out of favour, I think, as a starting wing back since they've been playing in that formation, just because he doesn't do enough going forward. But in a back four, I think he probably does come back into contention because it's a little bit more of a defensive first mindset. That would mean dropping Finn Sermon if it's Payne in the middle and Thingy on the right, Fenton on the right. Does he want to drop Finn Sermon? Does he want to pick Finn Sermon in a back four? When you're talking about like an 18, 19-year-old in his first season, he has been impressive in recent weeks. And like it definitely, I think if they play a back three, he will be in there. But a back three, you've got a little bit more cover as a centre back because there's more of you. And a back four, you might be a bit more exposed. So it's a frisky one. I'm very curious to see how he does that. Like, what do you do? The rest of the defence picks itself. Sam Sutton will be left back or left wing back. Scott Wooden's obviously going to be there. Ollie Sale in goal, that all takes care of itself. The other one is because Gael Sandoval isn't needed in midfield if Clayton Lewis is playing in midfield, he can play further forward where he's more expected to, which presumably would drop Ben Old back to the bench, which is fine. He can be an impact sub later on if needed, or just, he's done his job for the team to help get them this far anyway. So regardless, you pick your best team for a finals game. David Ball probably in there as well, Breno Piscopo in there as well, which means only one out of Gary Hooper and Ben Waine. Now, if you're just going head to head, there's no competition. Like, love Ben Waine, but Gary Hooper's an import player. He's the dude you're going to pick. But if you don't think Gary Hooper's got 90 minutes in him, which he might well not, because he's only recently come back from an injury layoff that was probably, at least as long as Clayton Lewis is, and he's been struggling with injuries all season, do you maybe think it might be better to start Waine, play him 60 minutes, bring on Hooper as the impact off the bench, and then also that would mean Hooper is out there if the game goes to extra time and penalties. Like he will be available for that. Your most experienced, best goal scorer. Like that's another one which I'm curious to see how they go. Like, do you want more minutes of Hooper, or do you want him out there prioritizing the back end of the game? Like, if you start him, then you're saying, well, we can be 2-0 up by that 60-minute mark and in control of the game. It doesn't matter. But if it's 0-0 and he's lost his legs, you got to bring on Ben Waine. Like it's a different story. So just that balance of it. It's not necessarily like this player is better or that player needs to play, or if this guy starts, then the team's got no hope, or if this guy starts, then that's the difference between these, like between a win and a loss. It's nothing like that. It's just about the balance of how he wants to play. Do you go with that back four? If it is a back four, where does Tim Payne play? And then how do you balance Gary Hooper returning to fitness as well? So all of that is really interesting, and I honestly don't know which way it's going. That's why I just chuck it up rhetorically. It's just going to be interesting to see how that goes. I will say, if they win, if they beat Western United, and there's a good optimism that they're at least in with a chance there, the A-League finals format has changed a little bit this year. It's where they, as the sixth place, they'll be the lowest qualifying team to the next round, so they will play Melbourne City regardless, the premiers. But the semifinals now are a two-legged affair. There's like a home and away thing. So I think I haven't looked it up to see, but I assume that would mean that they would be able to play a home semi-final in Wellington. I would guess. I don't think they'd bother doing it in Australia unless they're forced to for some reason, or double booked or whatever. But I would hope if they can get through Western United, and you don't want to look ahead of the game ahead of you when it comes to finals time. That's always a dangerous thing. But hypothetically speaking, I think that would mean they could have another home game before the season is out, and that would be obviously quite amazing. Against the Melbourne City team that they really did compete quite well with in that last game of the regular season, once they brought on guys like Lewis and Piscopo off the bench.
Somehow, Wellington Phoenix, extremely volatile, but pretty solid, which is pretty decent. Another extremely volatile footy team is the Aotearoa Warriors, who I can't say they are more volatile than the Phoenix, though, because some of the stuff you've told me, Wellington Phoenix losing 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, whatever it is, and then winning the next week, that is the football equivalent of a rugby league, 50-0, or not beating a team with a red card and a yellow card, and that type of situations the Warriors find themselves in. It feels to me like the Phoenix have been more volatile, and here they are playing finals footy in the A-League, which is pretty impressive. And there's a chance the Warriors could do that. Who knows? This week they faced the Rabbitohs. Just on that game last week, obviously a bit of a kerfuffle, but the Sharks are good. And any good sports team is going to do what the Sharks did. And it's kind of something interesting because we're seeing a lot more red cards. We're seeing a lot more yellow cards impacting games of Super Rugby, Rugby Union, and Rugby League in the NRL. The good teams don't lose the game when they've got a red card. You think of a red card in an NRL game, you think game over. Like Manly Seagulls, they had Carl Lawton get a red card, and then they lost the game. They tried hard, but that's the point. They tried hard, but they still lost the game because they were missing a player. Mitch Barnett gets red carded. I think that was against Panthers ages ago. And shit's hit the fan since then. They've just gone downhill. They went downhill in that game and then spiraled out of control further. Good sports teams find something else. And that's what the Sharks did. To me, as a rugby league fan, I learned more about the Sharks in that situation than I did the Warriors. Because the Warriors were probably not going to beat the Sharks for starters. And then it was an opportunity for the Sharks to find extra mana. And the good teams can find that extra mana, that extra zip in their performance to rally behind the circumstances. And that's what they did. Sharks are a good team. The Warriors are a mediocre team. And I wrote about this morning, that this is the best Warriors season since 2018. And since I think the grand final in 2011, the Warriors have had 2 winning seasons, so 50% winning or better. Right now, they're 4-5. So if they defeat the Rabbitohs, they're 5-5. They're 50% winning, or in America, a 500 record, whatever the fuck. That would put the Warriors on track for their third. Well, if they beat the Rabbitohs, it will be their 3rd season since 2011 that they have had a 50% winning record or better. Now, forget what that tells us about the Warriors for the last 10 years and think about the reactions to these performances in contrast with whether it's their best season since 2018 or their 3rd best season since 2011. The reaction to these performances doesn't align with the general situation of the Warriors, which I find interesting. But somehow they went up a spot in the ladder as well. I think
I can tell you why that was.
Yeah, I think the Dragons' loss might have helped that, but it was it was interesting because on the NRL ladder, there's a green arrow, there's a red arrow, and it's like, I don't know, there's just these things that are happening in contrast to how some people are reacting to the Warriors' performances, whether it's the stuff I just said, or if it's just a real simple thing, like you go to check the ladder and you're like, yeah, fuck, the Warriors suck, eh? You're like, yeah, everyone hates them. They can't do shit. It's the worst Warriors team ever. What's going on? They went up a spot in the ladder. Like, it's just a weird juxtaposition of these ideas that I am finding interesting as we venture forward, learning about ourselves through the Warriors, which is the adventure we're all on, the journey we're all on.
Yeah, the Dragons had their scheduled hiding at the hands of the Melbourne Storm. Every team has to go through it at least once a season. It was the Dragons' turn this week, and they lost 42-6, and that points difference, even with the Warriors losing 29-10 against a team that had 12 men, sometimes 11.
Well,
the Warriors 4 points better off than the Dragons on the table. So that 36-point hiding that the Dragons copped was just enough for the Warriors to sneak up.
And the Warriors copped a far bigger hiding from the Storm. So something's wonky with the Dragons where they did better against the Storm, but they went down a spot on the ladder. It's a very strange situation. But with regards to the Warriors, they're facing the Rabbitohs. This is a pretty even matchup. The Rabbitohs have the same record. They're a spot ahead of the Warriors on the ladder. Tohu Harris is back for the Warriors, and really interested just to see what happens down that right edge for the Warriors, because you got Sean Johnson, you got Tohu Harris, no Rocco Berry, he's out with Adam Pompey coming in at center. Marcelo Montoya returns on the wing. I think people have forgotten that Marcelo Montoya was just a really solid NRL winger, quite aggressive, did his job, was pretty solid. And this Warriors team looks far more solid than previous Warriors teams, whether it's Tohu Harris on an edge or Marcelo Montoya back on the wing. And I've got to throw this up, wildcard, because this was one of the most interesting stat lines I've seen in rugby league. We, at the Niche Case, we're known to peruse statistics quite a bit. And, you know, we know our way around Cricinfo stats. I know my way around the New Zealand Cricket Archive stats pages and all that stuff. So when I go to NRL and check the rugby league stats, I'm doing a bit of quick math. 10 meters per run. Is it 8 meters per run? Is it 9 meters per run? Just doing some gauging there. Sean Johnson had an interesting stat combination. He had the most missed tackles for the Warriors, and he had the slowest play the ball. So he that's with and without the footy. Now, this isn't Ash Taylor, 11 missed tackles, as once again, respectfully, Ash Taylor, big man, big it up to you. But we just had that funky scenario where he missed 11 tackles in one game. It's not to hate on Ash Taylor, it's just happened, and I was interested, I was intrigued. It perked up my antenna.
11 missed tackles for every hip that he had in that game.
Whereas Sean Johnson, he has the slowest play the ball, 5.6 seconds. He didn't run the footy either, and he made errors, so it was a really bad stat line. But I just found it interesting. With and without the footy, Sean Johnson was ridiculously bad. Because any play the ball, I think the Sharks, like all their play the ball speeds were under 4 seconds, for example. And then Sean Johnson's got the slowest play the ball, and he's the worst defender. I've never seen anything like that on a rugby league NRL stat line. So the thing about Sean Johnson is the same thing about the Warriors, which is the same thing about the Wellington Phoenix wildcard. Whatever happened last week doesn't matter. The Warriors can be shit last week. Sean Johnson can be shit last week. What do we know about these athletes and these teams? They'll be good the next week. So the worse Sean Johnson was last week, I'd say the better he's going to be this week. And that's how it's set up Sean Johnson. But yeah, just generally, I think this is a winnable game for the Warriors coming up against the Rabbitohs. Rabbitohs need to find something themselves. So that will be interesting. And look out for the combination between Shaun Johnson and Tohu Harris on that right edge. And think about what you can do with Iliasa Katoa as a player. Think about the plays you can run as for Katoa at right edge. Then think about the plays you can run for Tohu Harris at right edge. With all due respect to Iliasa Katoa, he's getting a short ball or he's running a decoy. He's not passing. He might get an offload, but that's after the tackle. That's after he hit the short ball. Tohu Harris, to me, he's the moldy Wade Graham. He can kick, he can pass, he can tackle, he can run, he's got footwork, he does everything. He's played center, he's played middle forward, he's played on an edge before. And bit of interesting Tohu Harris career ideas here. Like straight up, he's one of the best Aotearoa rugby league players ever. But this Warriors stuff hasn't quite worked out for him as best as he would hope, but pretty similar to everyone else who joins the Warriors, especially from the Melbourne Storm. And he hasn't really played for Aotearoa Kiwis much recently. And he's actually said that he won't play for Aotearoa Kiwis again, if I remember that correctly. He is someone who could, if he plays for a few more years, he could really tap into his ability as a footballer and further his legacy as one of the best NRL players, one of the best Aotearoa players to ever exist. So he's kind of got some, not like, he doesn't need anything to play for, but I love Tohu Harris as a rugby league player. He is one of my favorite players. He was one of my favorite players at the Storm, the Bromwich brothers, the Sofa Solomona especially. Comes to the Warriors, we saw some glimpses, especially that 2018 season. And then he's just been out injured. He's had to drag the Warriors with him through like absolute bullcucker. Last year, he averaged 173 meters per game. And that's good Tohu Harris, but it's wasted. It's good Tohu Harris, bad Warriors. And I think he's got so much potential as a rugby baller because he played rugby union back in Aotearoa. I'm interested by what this next kind of phase looks like for Tohu Harris. And if he can just settle in on that right edge, offer his skill set, he is an Aotearoa Kiwis caliber player. And he, like, just having him on the field, because I also wrote this in the Warriors diary this morning, the Warriors leaders were shit against the Sharks. And again, everyone wants to talk about Reece Walsh. Reece Walsh doesn't win the games for the Warriors. The Warriors, when they lose, Shaun Johnson's bad, Wade Egan doesn't do much, Fanua Blake is below par. Those things happen. Watene Zelezniak, noted psycho runner, he didn't make any meters against the Sharks. But when the Warriors are good, it's their leaders who are good. They set the tone. Now you're adding another leader, and that's where the Warriors get their wins from, not necessarily random one-off-ish plays from Reece Walsh.
Yeah, because the random one-off-ish plays, they come off the back of those other things. Like you gotta like lay the platform before you can get to that stuff. Can't just expect, because if you are like, maybe you can come up with some like game-breaking move now and then, but it's not going to sustain you over 80 minutes. You got to be able to do the other stuff first, and that was why it was like a weird game, a really weird game, that Sharks one, because it felt like a game the Warriors maybe like might have been able to win it anyway. They might have been nice and competitive anyway, but like up until the red card, the feeling was that if they were going to, it was going to have to be an absolute grind kind of thing. Like they're going to have to be like, their forward pack especially is going to have to really be competitive, and then maybe you get some of that flash from Johnson and Walsh, etc. But different style of game to what you then come to expect after a red card, where suddenly the impetus is on you to be the dominant team and to really like dictate the flow of the game and the pace of the game and these kind of things. And it was sort of like the Warriors got caught between two game plans, and they weren't really able to make that adjustment on the fly, even though it seems like it's to their big advantage. And, it is to your advantage to play with an extra man. But they just didn't really seem to adjust to that. Whereas the Sharks, like, say what you want about the Warriors not being able to put away a team who was down a man for like 50 minutes of that game or whatever it was. It's like, other than, there was a Sean Johnson grubber kick on attack that went dead. It was a terrible kick, but one or two little moments, like errors sprinkled in here or there, but it's not like there were major moments where you're like, the Warriors are playing absolutely terrible here. It was just more like a slightly too passive game, or just they didn't control it the way they should have. And it just makes me think overwhelmingly, regardless of what people are going to say about jumping on the anti-Warriors kind of bandwagon stuff after a disappointing loss, and hearing like people just with absolute delusion in their brain say things about like, this is an all-time low for the team. Like they lost 70-10 2 games ago. Like chill on that front. It's not even their worst loss this month. But what the Sharks did, I think, is really the story of that game. To be honest, it's the way they managed that, down one man and then for 10 minutes during the second half down two men, was astounding. Like that was an incredible example of game management and how to stay in control of a game when you are at a deficit. Like they put away the risky stuff, but they still played, with big energy. They didn't go into their shells. They made sure they could get good meters up the middle and try to control the game with the kicking stuff, and took their opportunities when they came along, like hung in there long enough that the Warriors started to feel the pressure, and then suddenly points are available towards the end of the game, really put them away there. And just the whole performance from the Sharks is just a masterclass in how to play with a red card and like modern day NRL. I thought that was incredible. And to be honest, more of the story than whatever the Warriors did in that game, which just sort of felt like a game that passed them by. Where, like I say, the impression I got was a team that was sort of stuck between two game plans and couldn't really make those adjustments on the fly.
The impression I got was there was a good team and a mediocre team, and the good team can absorb a red card. Good teams can absorb a yellow card. That's what makes them good. But far more interesting than the Warriors wild card is Kiwi-NRL stuff. And I have to throw this up because it's something that's brewing with the Rabbitohs. Rabbitohs have Jackson Paulo at center. He has chopped and changed between center and wing throughout the season. He's been out for a few weeks, so just keep an eye on where he actually plays for the Rabbitohs. Come game time, Cody Nikorima is in for the Rabbitohs off the bench, number 14. I'd say he's not quite. I'd say Sean Johnson is less inconsistent than Cody Nikorima when they're playing in the halves. So that's the scale that we're working with here. But Cody Nikorima will come off for the bench for the Rabbitohs. And I mean, if Damien Cook isn't playing his best footy, I'm not sure that Cody Nikorima is going to do more than Cook. Like if Cook's not running out of dummy half as much as he used to and impacting games that way, I don't know if Cody Nikorima is going to do that. Also, the Rabbitohs have Nikorima and Saliva Havili on their bench, and they are fairly similar players. Saliva Havili can cover middle forward, though, so that's why he's on the bench with Nikorima. But the thing that I'm thinking about the most, and I've noted this, there's been plenty of buzz around the Rabbitohs. I've seen a couple videos and yarns about Josiah Karapani. He is from Otara. I think he went to Pakuranga College, and he is in the extended squad for the Rabbitohs for this game. He was part of the awesome 2020 Warriors SG Ball team, and then he went over to the Rabbitohs after COVID, and he played 9 games of SG Ball last year, and then he went up to Jersey Flegg and played 7 more games, which is a key indicator of a good player. They're going from SG Ball to Jersey Flegg in the same year. But this year, Josiah Karapani has gone from Jersey Flegg under 21s to reserve grade. And in reserve grade, he has played 5 games. He's scored 3 tries, 2 try assists, 6 line breaks. He is a gun, and there's plenty of them. There's really good Kiwi-NRL players throughout the NRL, especially as we've talked about a fair bit in reserve grade, waiting for their opportunity. I don't think we will see Josiah Karapani against the Warriors, but he is close, and he will make his Kiwi-NRL debut this year. Shout out 18thman.com, but they list his junior club as East Taranaki Rugby Union. Now, based on what I know, it's meant to be East Tamaki Rugby Union. And that's all good because he is from Otara, which is East Tamaki, and he did play rugby union before going to Pakuranga College, where he started playing rugby league, and then he got scouted by the Warriors. So I think he is an East Tamaki Rugby Union junior. Who else played rugby union for East Tamaki back in the day?
You want me to guess there?
Anyone? Chuck
I
a
don't
name?
know. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck?
He did. There you go.
There you go.
I don't think he's that similar to Tuivasa-Sheck, but he did, same background. Big up Otara as well. So keep an eye on Josiah Karapani, one of the many fantastic young players competing for NRL gigs. And he will definitely play NRL footy this year for the Rabbitohs as well. And that's something else I am pondering just to finish up the podcast. A lot of the high pedigree Kiwi-NRL juniors are now starting to settle into the NRL. So Christian Tuipulotu, he a high pedigree junior in Aotearoa. Now he's playing a bunch of games on the wing for the Sea Eagles. Jordan Ricky, one of the most sought after recruits out of Aotearoa, made all the rep teams. He's starting on the edge for the Broncos every single game. Even someone like Te Maire Martin, who was a high pedigree player in Aotearoa and as a junior with the West Tigers, bit of a longer journey, but he's playing fullback in the NRL. He's there. Guys like Stafford Toa and Asu Kepaoa for the West Tigers. They made all the rep teams in Aotearoa. Got scouted by Knights and Roosters. Now they've found a home at the West Tigers. Hayes Perham made all the rep teams out of Rotorua Boys High School. Rugby Union and Rugby League. He's playing on the wing for the Parramatta Eels, and it's tough mahi. That game against the Panthers, he got picked up and dragged back every single time he ran the footy, but he's not really a winger. He's just doing a job for the Parramatta Eels, and he's doing a job for one of the toughest NRL teams, and that's kind of the shine that I enjoy for the high pedigree players. He didn't get much of an opportunity at the Warriors, and then he gets put in a real tough scenario where he has to play wing for one of the toughest NRL teams, and he's just doing his job. And there's those type of players off the top of my head. Obviously, you got guys like Joey Manu, Satili Tupanuia. They are, representative players as well, and they're just churning out the mahi. But it's the younger guys that I'm really thinking about. And any rugby league nerd in Aotearoa knows these names. These dudes were all around the Aotearoa grassroots landscape. Christian Tuipulotu, Stafford Toa, Asu Kepaoa, those type of characters, Hayes Perham. They've been on the scene for a while. They've made a bunch of rep teams in Aotearoa, and it just feels like we're entering this time when now those dudes are getting their opportunity. Not necessarily making their debuts, but consistent game time, opportunities on the field, and there's plenty more. Case in point, Josiah Karapani, who has quickly progressed through the Rabbitohs system over the course of 2 years as well.
Yeah, beauty. Well, I was going to say they're special names to point out or anything like that, but you just kind of mentioned a few, so probably don't need to do that. I don't know. Anything else to touch on before we close shop?
Matthew Tomoko, Raiders centre.
Yeah.
Another exceptional, played first 15 for Auckland Grammar while also making rugby league rep teams in Aotearoa. Now he's starting every game at centre for the Canberra Raiders. Let me just check more. Griffin Niami out of Greymouth. He was cracking rep teams in Aotearoa. He's playing for the Cowboys off the bench. Oh, but that's where we'll stop. We'll just finish there. Because I don't know, I could spin another big yarn about rugby league wildcard. But any other rugby league thoughts will be thrown in tomorrow's email newsletter, as well as any upcoming football thoughts. You did mention that your Wellington Phoenix yarn preview is live as well, so check that out. Otherwise, kia kaha, stay beautiful, and we'll be back with more podcasts early next week. Big up, chit.